Good morning children. How are you all? I hope you all fine. So today we are going to start one new lesson from history, that is the Mughal Empire. Okay children, what is the topic of this lesson? The Mughal Empire. Okay, so we are going to see about Mughal Empire in this lesson. So listen very carefully, it's very interesting story. Okay, start. So first, who were the Mughals? First we are going to see about who were the Mughals. Okay, who are they? Okay, descendants of two great lineage of rulers. So these Mughals are descendants. They are the generation of two great rulers. Okay, so from Mughals' mother side, they belong to Genghis Khan, the Mongol ruler who ruled over parts of China and Central Asia. Okay, so Genghis Khan, from that descendants, okay, from mother side, Mongol rulers, okay, and from father side, they are the successors of Timur, the ruler of Iran, Iraq and modern day Turkey, okay. So from mother side, they belong to Genghis Khan, the Mongol ruler, okay, famous king is there in mother side, and in father side, successors of Timur. Okay, they are the ruler of Iran, Iraq and modern day Turkey. Okay, but these Mughals, they did not like to be called Mughal or Mongol. Okay, they don't like them to be called like Mughal or Mongol. Okay, because this Genghis Khan, okay, is a Mongol ruler from mother side relation. So his memory is associated with many torturing of many people and massacre of innumerable people. So they don't like to be called as Mongol because they are not happy with that. Okay, so it also linked with the Uzbeks. Uzbeks are like one of the Mongol competitor. They are like competing with Mughals. So they don't like to be called like Mongol. Okay, they are not happy with the mother side, but they always proud of their Timurid ancestry. Okay, from their father side ancestry. Okay, so they are very happy to be called as Timurid because of their ancestor had captured Delhi in 1398. So they captured Delhi in 1398. So they were like very proud to be saying themselves as Timurid. Okay, so they are not happy to be called as Mongol because they don't like that Genghis Khan's some rule. So they always proud to be calling themselves as Timurid. Okay children, so are you all clear with this? Very good. So we'll move to the next. So look here, this is Genghis Khan image and this is Timurid image. First, Mughal military campaigns. Now we are going to see about Mughal military campaigns. So first we are going to see about Babur. Okay, so this Babur is the first Mughal emperor. Who was the first Mughal emperor? Babur. Okay children, who was the first Mughal emperor? Babur. Okay, he ruled from 1526 to 1530. Okay, he succeeded the throne of Farhana in 1494 only when he was 12 years old. When he was 12 years old, he succeeded on place. Okay, and after that, due to some invention of Mongol group, this Mongol some invention and coming to that place, because of that, he have to leave from that place. Okay, this Babur have to leave from that place. Okay children, then in 1526, defeated the Sultan of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi at Panipat. Okay, then captured Delhi and Agra. Then he captured Delhi and Agra again. Okay, so who was the first emperor, Mughal emperor? Babur was the first Mughal emperor. He ruled from 1526 to 1530. Okay, he got the throne of Farhana in which year? When he was 12 years old. After that, because of Mongol invention, he had to move from that place. Then after, in 1526, he defeated the Sultan of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi, okay, and he captured Delhi and Agra, and he started ruling from 1526 to 1530. 1526 to 1530, he ruled that place. So who was the first Mughal emperor? Babur. Understood, children? Well, so next, Mughal traditions of succession. Okay, Mughals traditions of succession. So what tradition they followed? Did not believe in the rule of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited his father's estate. Okay, so they did not believe the rule of primogeniture. That means the eldest son, the first son will inherit all the father's place and estate. They don't follow that. Follow the Mughal and Timurid custom of corpus Sanari inheritance. Corpus Sanari inheritance. That means a division of the inheritance amongst the son. So all among the son they will divide the inheritance. Okay. Not only the first son. Okay. So they followed this. They did not believe in giving the power only to the eldest son. They were like division among the sons. Understood, children? Very good. Then Mughals' relations with other rulers. How their relations with other rulers? The Mughal rulers campaigned constantly against rulers who refused to accept their authority. However, as they became powerful, many rulers like the Rajputs joined them voluntarily. So, these Mughal rulers, they were like against some rule, they were like constantly against some rulers who refused to accept their authority, because they were like very good and calling some to accept their authority, but some will not be accepting that. So they were like constantly against them. But however, some Rajputs, some powerful rulers like Rajputs, they were like joining this Mughal voluntarily. Okay, they were joining this Mughals voluntarily. So powerful rulers like Rajputs, they joined Mughals voluntarily. Understood? Next, many of the Rajputs married their daughters into Mughal families and received high positions, but many resisted as well. So many of the Rajput kings, they married their daughters to these Mughal kings and they got good position in the Mughal empire. Okay, but many resisted that. Okay, for example, Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar refused to accept Mughal authority. So this Sisodia Rajput, he belonged to Mewar place and he refused to accept the position in Mughal empire. However, upon defeat, they were honorably treated by the Mughals, given their lands back as assignments. Okay, so this Mughals, after fighting a war with some other country and after their defeat, that they will treat the defeated kingdom say equally, honorably. Okay, they won't torture, they will respect. Okay, they give their lands back to them as assignments. Okay, this careful balance became between defeating but not humiliating their opponents enabled the Mughals to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. So, even after defeating one place, these Mughals will not treat them as a slave. They treated them with respect and with honor. So, that many kings and many chieftains, they helped, like they were not opposing them, they were also helped them to extend the place. So the Mughals extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. Okay. However, it was difficult to keep this balance all the time. But even though it was difficult to maintain like this every time. Then we are going to see about Mansabdars and Jagirdars. Mansabdars and Jagirdars. Okay. Empire expanded to include different regions. Okay. So this empire expanded to include many regions. Mughals recruited diverse bodies of people from Turkish nobles. They went on to include Iranians, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas and other groups. So this Mughal recruited people from different places, like from Turkish nobles. They also included Iranians, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas and other groups they have recruited. Okay. some joined Mughal service as Mansabdars. So, okay, some people they joined to Mughal as Mansabdars. Mansabdars. So, what is Mansabdars? This term refers to an individual who holds a mansab. So, Mansabdars means a man who is having a mansab. Now, what is mansab? Mansab meaning a position or rank. Position or rank. Okay, this is a grading system used by Mughal to rate. Okay, accordingly they will rate who is having this rank, who is having this mansab, he will be giving this rank. Okay, so rank, salary and military responsibilities. So according to that mansab, they will be given rank, salary and military responsibilities. Okay, rank and salary determined by numerical value. Okay, rank and salary they will determine by a numerical value, that is ZAT. ZAT. So higher the ZAT, more prestigious noble position in the court and larger salary. If they have more ZAT, they will be having more prestigious position in the court and they have more salary. Understood, children? So this empire expanded to include different regions. These Mughals, they recruited people from many places, the Turkish nobles, Iranians, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas and other groups. Some people joined Mughals as Mansabdars. So Mansabdars means a man who is having mansab. So mansab, what is mansab? It is a position or rank. Okay, grading system. So accordingly, they have rank, salary and military responsibilities. Okay, this rank and salary are determined by a numerical value, one value, that is ZAT. Okay, if they have higher ZAT, they will have higher position and higher salary. Lower ZAT, they will have lower position and lower salary. Understood, children? Very good. So next, Mansabdar's military responsibilities require him to maintain specific number of Sawar or cavalry men. Cavalry men were reviewed, registered and their horses branded before the Mansabdar received the money to pay them a salary. So, this Mansabdar's military responsibility require him to maintain specific number of Sawar or cavalry men. So, the horses and those who are taking care of the horses. So, everything they have to maintain, right? Because the horses have to be included in the war. So, they need horses and the men who is taking care of the horses. So, everything they have to maintain. And this cavalry man, they were reviewed, registered and their horses have to be showed before this Mansabdar received the money to pay them as the salary. Before they pay this Mansabdars, before paying to this cavalry men, they have to show their horses. Okay. Then after that only they will receive the money to pay these people salary. Understood, children? Very good. Then Mansabdar's salaries were revenue assignments called jagirs. So this Mansabdar's salaries like revenue assignments. Okay. That is called as jagirs. That is called as jagirs. Somewhat like iktas. Somewhat like iktas. So iktas we have learned in previous chapters. So iktas means iktas will be handled by muktis, right? So most Mansabdars did not administer their jagirs. Okay, their Mansabdars they will not administer the jagirs, that assignments they have given land or something to maintain, right? They will not administer that. Mansabdar only had right to revenue of their assignments collected for them by their servants. So they only have the rights to revenue of their assessments to see that money and everything, tax, collecting tax, only that they have. They will not administer the jagirs. While they themselves served in another part of the country because they will be in some other place. During Akbar's reign, jagirs were assessed so that their revenue were roughly same as the salary of the Mansabdar. So, during Akbar's reign, the jagirs were assessed. Properly they will be assessing how much they have, what will be the revenue. So that will be roughly same as the salary of the Mansabdar. Understood, children? Good. However, things changed by Aurangzeb rule. So these things changed by Aurangzeb rule. So Aurangzeb is a famous king. So during his rule, many things changed. During this time, the actual revenue collected was often less than the granted sum. So during his time, the revenue was collected, right? That is less than the actual sum. Okay. The number of Mansabdars also increased, thus leading to a long wait before they received a jagir. So the Mansabdars numbers also increased. So if there are more Mansabdars, they have to wait for a long to receive a jagir. These and other factors lead into shortage in number of jagirs. So because there are more Mansabdars but jagir is less, so it remained to the shortage in the number of jagirs. Jagirdars tried to get as much revenue as possible while they had a jagir. Aurangzeb, unable to control these developments during the end of his reign, peasantry suffered. So what happened? Due to the increasing number of Mansabdars, there is a shortage in jagir. Okay, so the Aurangzeb is unable to control all these developments during the end of the region. He is unable to control what is happening. Okay, and also the peasantry suffered. Okay, the farmers, they will be suffering. Okay, Zabt and Zamindars. Now we are going to see about Zabt and Zamindars. Okay, first what we have seen, Mansabdars and Jagirdars. We have seen about them. Now we are going to see about Zabt and Zamindars. The main source of income for Mughal rulers, tax on the produce of peasantry. So what is the main source of income for Mughal rulers? Tax they are getting from the produce of the peasantry. From the farmers they are yielding, getting the yield, right? From that they will be putting some tax for this much for this type of crop. So like this they are putting some tax, right? So that tax is the main income. Some of these taxes were paid by the peasants via the rural elites like the headman or the local chieftain termed as zamindars by the Mughals. So some of the taxes, how these peasants will pay, they will not directly go to the king and pay, right? So these peasants like rural elites, they will have some headman in the village or some local head, they are called as zamindars. So they will pay to the zamindars. Understood, children? They are appointed by the Mughals. Okay, they are called, like they, through them they have to pay. Okay, so termed as zamindars. Okay, zamindars by the Mughals. Okay, understood? So these peasants, how they will pay? They will pay to the zamindars. They will pay the tax to the zamindars. Todar Mal, Akbar's revenue minister, took a careful survey of the crop yields, prices and areas cultivated for a 10-year period. Okay, so Todar Mal, this Todar Mal is Akbar's revenue minister, maintaining all the revenue things. Okay, income and all, income, what are the things, what are the spend, everything. So his Akbar's revenue minister Todar Mal, he took a careful survey of crop yields, price, their area cultivated for 10 years. Okay, 1570 to 1580. Based on this data, tax was fixed on each crop in cash. So based on this survey, they fixed tax for each crop in cash. Understood, children? Every province was divided into revenue circles with its own schedule of revenue rates for the individual crops. Revenue system called ZAT. So now what they did? They divided the province into revenue circle, small group, and with its schedule of revenue rates for individual crops. Okay, this is called ZAT. Like they divided the area into small circle, and they have for different crops different taxes, like that they fixed. Okay, that revenue system is called ZAT. Prevalent in areas where Mughal administrators could survey the land and keep very careful accounts, not possible in provinces like Gujarat and Bengal. So this system is very prevalent and very famous in areas where the Mughal administrator can see that land and keep all that accounts. but not possible in some places like Gujarat and Bengal. In some areas, the zamindars exercised more power. Exploitation by Mughal administrators could lead them to rebellion. At times, zamindar and peasants of the same caste are allied in rebelling against Mughal authority. Peasant revolt challenged the stability of the Mughal Empire from the end of 17th century. So what happened? In some areas, the zamindars have more power. So the zamindars and the peasants belonging to the same caste, they joined and they took a rebellion, like fighting against the Mughal authority. We will not pay this. Okay. So this peasantry revolt, this like a small fighting, okay. This challenged the stability of Mughal Empire. This challenged the Mughal Empire, like a difficulty to the Mughal Empire, okay, from the end of 17th century. Look, this is a picture. So now we are going to see the closer look of Akbar's policy. So the administration led by Akbar, okay, how he administered that place, what is the administration of Akbar, that is clearly discussed by Abul Fazl in the book Akbarnama in its last volume, the Ain-i-Akbari. So Ain-i-Akbari, that is the third volume of Akbarnama book. Who is the author? Abul Fazl. He is the writer and he explained more about Akbar's administration. Understood, children? Then Akbar's empire was divided into provinces called Subas. Okay, Subas. Akbar's empire was divided into small province that is called by Subas, and that is covered by a Subadar who carried out both political and military functions. So Akbar's province, they were divided like this big province. His kingdom is divided into small area that is called as Subas. That Subas is governed by a Subadar. Okay. He carried out both political and military functions. Both everything he will be handling. Every province had a financial officer or diwan. Okay. For each province, they had one financial officer that is called as diwan. Okay. Subadar was supported by other officers such as military paymaster. So, for helping the Subadar, there are some officers. We call first one is military paymaster by Bakshi. Okay, military paymaster. Then the minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage. Such. Then military commanders, Pashdas, and the town police commander, Kodwal, in order to maintain peace and order in the province. So this Subadar, the Subadar have some officers to help to maintaining that place. So who are those officers? First military paymaster, and next the minister in charge of religious and charitable patronage. Then military commanders. Then the town police commander. Okay, they all help to make peace and order in that province. Okay, so next, Akbar's nobles commanded large armies, okay, and had to access large amount of revenue. When they were loyal, the empire functioned efficiently. By the end of 17th century, many nobles had independent networks. Loyalties to the empire weakened by self-interest. So what happens? Akbar's nobles, okay, Akbar's nobles, they have commanded very big armies and they collected more revenue and they were loyal to the empire, and because of that by the end of 17th century, till that their functions were going very smoothly and they were very loyal to the empire. After that, what happened? The nobles had independent network. So that loyalty to the empire, they were not all that loyal to the empire. That is weakened. Okay. Akbar, when at Fatehpur Sikri during 1570s, stated discussions on religion with the ulama, brahmanas, Jesuit priests who were Roman capitalists and Zoroastrians. So, when Akbar was at Fatehpur Sikri, he had one discussion with all the religious leaders. Okay, that took place in Ibadat Khana. So in that place, Ibadat Khana, that discussion took place. In that they discussed matters and finally they took an idea, that is Sul-i-Hul. Sul-i-Hul, that means universal peace. So universal peace means that focused on mainly on honesty, justice, peace. That is universally applicable. So what are the three? Honesty, justice and peace. Abul Fazl helped Akbar in framing a vision of governance around the idea of Sul-i-Hul. So who helped in framing the vision? Abul Fazl. Okay. This principle of governance was followed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan. This Akbar principle was followed by Jahangir and Shah Jahan. Mughal Empire in 17th century and later. Then after 17th century, how it was. Okay, in the 17th century and after how it was. The administrative and military efficiency lead to great economical and commercial prosperity. International travelers describe it as the fabled land of wealth. So many travelers, they were attracted by our wealth and they go like it's the fabled land of wealth. Okay, but even though state of poverty existed, okay, side by side state of poverty, okay, poverty means very poor condition, that also existed. Then inequalities were glaring. There are here some inequalities. Okay. So documents from the 20th year of Shah Jahan's reign show that high-ranking Mansabas were only 445 in number, 445 in number out of 8,000. So in 8,000, only 445 were in high. Okay. And this Mansabdas, they spent a great deal of their income on salaries and goods for benefiting the artisans and peasantry. Okay, for helping the peasantry, farmers, they have helped a lot. Okay. However, scale of revenue coalition left very little of investment in the hands of primary producers. Even though the primary producers like peasants and artisans, they had only small amount in their hand. Poorest lived in a hand to mouth existence. So the poorest, they are like poor only. They could not invest more in addition to increase the productivity because they don't have enough money. Okay. Next. Enormous wealth and resources commanded by Mughal elite made them extremely powerful in the late 17th century. As the authority of Mughal Empire declined, his servants emerged as the powerful centers of power in the region, constituting new dynasties and holding command of provinces like Hyderabad and Awadh that continued to recognize the Mughal Empire in Delhi as their masters. By the 18th century, the province of empire consolidated their independent political identities. So, what happened? Some people, some of the servants, okay, of Mughal emperor, they emerged as a powerful center of power in the regions. Like they constituted new dynasties and holding the power for the particular place. Okay, they recognize the Mughal emperor in Delhi as their master. So he is a master, and we are like individually we are doing this. But even though he is a master, Mughal emperor is a master. So understood, children? So that's all in the Mughal Empire lesson. So in Mughal Empire lesson, first we have seen about who were Mughals, what are their ancestry, and next we have seen about who is the first Mughal emperor, about Babur. Okay. Then we have seen about how they were ruling, what are the methods, Mansabdar, Jagirdars, the Zabt and Zamindar. Okay. Then we have seen about Akbar's policies. What are the Akbar's policies? And finally, we have seen about Mughal in 17th century and later. Okay. So that's all. That is the main topics we have covered here. So see this video once again, you will understand very clearly. It's just like a story, right? Here like a story, you will understand clearly. Okay. So thank you, children. Have a nice day.